Good morning. Thank you for coming to this session. To be honest, I was not expecting to see so many people, so I hope you won't be disappointed. This session is about using UI5 to test your data service, and I will start with no further explanation. So my name is Arnaud Bucholz, so I pronounce it the French way because actually I'm French. I'm working for SAP for the last 4 years, but I've been in the software industry for many years. I'm playing a lot with JavaScript, obviously, both front-end and back-end. And yeah, I'm quite passionate about JavaScript. I'm doing a lot of stuff. And yeah, I'm living in Canada right now. The agenda for today is quite packed, but actually it's just a story I would like to tell you about how from last year UI5con I had an idea, and then by evolving this idea I came up to this solution I would like to present you today. So talking about presentation, we have several projects that will be covered. I don't think I have to introduce UI5, right? But the second one is training UI5con 18 OPA, which is a project I built for last year UI5con, but that evolved since to support today's presentation. So everything I will show you today is part of this project. So if you want to do it yourself, just get it and play with it. It's all inside it. GSDOM is a project. It's a Node.js package that I use to build Node UI5 that I will present today. Some words about the presentations. So first of all, the message I would like you to remember is that there is way more than just UI in UI5. And actually, as you may know, there are at least tools to validate the behavior of the UI and to automate also the UI. But beside that, today what I would like to show you is how you can also use UI5 to test OData services. But the important message here is whatever I will show you, the official tooling that you have to use for UI5 development is obviously the UI5 tooling. Okay, so first part of the story, last year UI5con. Last year I came here actually to present something named A Journey with OPA. So since it was recorded, I will not replay the whole deck, it doesn't make sense. But if you're interested, you have a link to the recording so that you can see it. And actually this presentation will also be published so that you can access it and get all the links. Before going to the next steps, I need to put you back in the right context to explain why I started this project and where I'm coming from. So last year I presented OPA, which stands for one-page acceptance. It's a tool set that allows you to automate and validate the UI. The tests that you're building with this framework are organized in journeys and pages, and as a result, the developer creates legible test scenarios that can be easily maintained. But when it comes to UI testing, most of the UIs requires a backend actually to support the data, to store the data, but also to implement the business logic. So when you want to test your backend, typically what you do, you don't talk directly to a real backend because some of the operations you will do while testing your UI may actually mess up with the backend. You may delete records, you may also interact with physical devices or send emails, for instance. So you don't really want to talk with a real backend when you do UI testing. What you would do in that case, you would use the mock server. And the mock server, actually, the name is quite confusing because it's not a real server. It's a software component that lives inside the browser and that will intercept all the AJAX requests and decide for each of them if it has the answer to give it back to the caller or if it lets this request going through the network to reach the backend, for instance. When the mock server starts, it will load or generate data so that you have a stable data set to test your component with. And you can also customize the behavior of the mock server so that it simulates better what would be the backend. And by the way, a small advertisement, I'm doing a session this afternoon on building the mock server. So if you're interested, I will show how you can customize the mock server and what you can do with it. Just to finalize this first part, I would like to show you the application I built for last year, and I will also show you the network tab. It's quite small. I will try to zoom a little bit. I can't. Anyway, yeah, that's better, right? So this is the application that is running on top of the mock server. So as a result, if I do anything in the UI, the UI is working correctly, well, almost, but I will explain that one. But the point is that you have absolutely no network trace, because right now the application is self-sufficient, right? So for instance, if I create a new item, the item appears here, no network communication, but if I refresh the application, since the mock server is hosted inside the browser, it's also refreshed, so I start with a new fresh data. I lost my item I just created. Okay? So, after this UI5con 18, I was contacted by a colleague internally, and he submitted me a strange request. He was interested to use the mock server to actually validate a network configuration. In this scenario, he needed an OData server that was behind a particular network configuration, and he wanted to validate that this was working fine before going to production. So he wanted to leverage the mock server to do that. So I told him, it's not really the use case because the mock server lives inside the browser. So you cannot really have a server out of the mock server. And the guy told me, hey, I know. And actually, we have a prototype. So I was like, wow, what did you do? And what they did, they used Node.js with several packages from Node.js, Express, Socket.io, and Puppeteer, in order to build their platform. So to explain a little bit how it was working, when the Node.js server was starting, Puppeteer was used to start a Chrome headless, and inside the Node.js server, an Express module was used to implement an HTTP server, and this Chrome headless was connecting to this server, loading the mock server on all the mock data, and at the same time, Socket.io was used to establish a real-time network channel, between Node.js and this Chrome headless. Then, every time an OData request was reaching Node.js, it was transmitted through Socket.io to this Chrome headless, processed inside the mock server. The answer was sent back through the same channel and answered to the client. So, quite clever, actually, right? And when I saw that, I was like, there should be a way to do better, right? So, why not running the mock server directly inside Node.js so that we remove Chrome headless, remove all these additional packages we don't need? I did like every developer do in that kind of situation. I Googled a lot, and I found something named JSDOM. JSDOM actually is used to simulate a browser inside Node.js. So here you've got a typical booting sequence of SAP UI5, where you can see the script tag, and when you run JSDOM on top of that, it will build a window, a browser window, but inside Node.js, no need of a real browser, and it will simulate all the behavior of this window. So it will use DOM rendering, everything, but no UI typically. I would like to point to this URL, which is really important here. Okay? So when you start the window, you have to specify a URL. And to be honest, it almost worked out of the box. I say almost because there was some challenges. Typically, this JSDOM framework is quite huge. It has a huge digital footprint, and it's slow to start. But that's not the biggest deal. Synchronous requests are not allowed in JSDOM. This comes from the nature of Node.js, which is enforcing asynchronicity in your coding. Also, as you have to specify a URL when you create a new window, every time you try to access a request that is going out of the domain of this URL, then you are limited by the cross-origin resource sharing mechanism, so that you have to send the pre-flight to validate that this external server allows this access. Last but not least, the environments are isolated, which means you cannot really run Node.js code inside the browser, the simulated browser code. So because of that, if you want to build a mock server on top of JSDOM, you would need to have also an HTTP server so that you can load the mock server, the mock data, and everything you require, which is quite cumbersome. So one solution I found was to completely rewrite the XML HTTP request object. For those who don't know what it is, it's typically the component inside a browser that allows you to do AJAX requests. So while doing that, it opened the doors to support file system resources access. So no need to build an HTTP server anyway. I can just load the mock server files from the drive. It also allowed me to access any web resource natively using Node.js HTTP request and not going through the CORS limitation or anything. And last but not least, it also allows synchronous requests because I used the async that converts asynchronous code into synchronous, which is bad, but at some point I needed to get those synchronous requests working. And by doing that, I was able to build a mock server inside Node.js that acts as a real OData server. So no more hosted inside the browser. So just to show you, thank you. This server is actually running right now. If I click on the metadata, whoa, you have actually, sorry, it's a little bit small. You have this URL that is serving the metadata, right? But if you remember the application I just showed you, I can also run the application with a special parameter here that says no mock. So I disabled the mock server inside the browser window so that it will talk to the mock server that is hosted on my Node.js server. And as you can see here, every time I do something, this time requests are going out. And they are being answered by the simulated mock server stored in my Node.js server. To prove you that, if I create a new task, hello world, so it should appear somewhere. Yeah, here it is, right? And now if I refresh my browser window, since my mock server is a separate process and will not restart when I refresh my window, I should retrieve my task. Here it is. Okay? So this is a mock server running inside Node.js. And I found it pretty cool, actually. Then I said, okay, great. I've got mock server running inside Node.js. What else can we do? Well, I said, maybe I can just try to leverage every bit of UI5 from Node.js. Obviously, if you talk about UI, it doesn't make sense, right? I will not try to render a button inside Node.js. What would be the point of that? But remember, there is way more than UI in UI5. So what else can we do? Well, almost anything. And to allow that, I isolated this part that I built to run mock server inside Node.js and built a component, a package named Node.UI5 that allows you to run UI5 code inside Node.js. How does it work? You require the package like here, and asynchronously you get a promise that will resolve to the SAP namespace so that everything that is inside this code looks like what you would do with SAP UI5. So you can SAP UI require some dependencies and you will get them, and then you can use this, right? What are the benefits of doing that? First, it's pretty cool, right? On top of that, you will also access all the latest ES6 features which are available inside Node.js without having to use transpiling or Babel or whatsoever. It's natively supported by Node.js. But the most important point is that it's really easy to automate. If you want to automate such a tool, you just have a command line to run, right? You don't need Selenium, you don't need any Chrome headless, you don't need anything like that. It's just a command line. So if you want to integrate it in Jenkins, run the command line, and that's it. So here is an example of how you can access any OData server, and in particular, how I can access my mock server running in Node.js using Node.js running UI5. Okay? So how does it work? You have SAP UI require here. I will require the OData model, right? I also have this, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't, okay. I also have this Node.UI5 module called Promisify that will convert some of the asynchronous API of Node.UI5 so that they return a promise instead of using callbacks. The value of doing that is that I can use async and await keywords of ES6 to wait for these results. So for instance here, I will create a model connected to my local OData server. I will wait for the metadata to be loaded. That's easy. We've got a promise here, so I just use await. And then to read from my OData server, I would just use model.read async, which is a promisified version of read. And as a result, I will get my results here. Okay? So to show you that, I will do node test. And here it goes. So here, I was able to leverage OData model of UI5 inside a command line to get at least the first 10 items of my OData server. Yeah. Next step. Thank you. Next step. Since I'm really interested in testing quality and validating things, I thought I've got something here. Why not using this mechanism to test OData using UI5, right? Why doing that? Actually, I'm a UI developer. At SAP, I develop UIs. And as a UI developer, I'm the primary user of any OData service that is exposed by the backend. But I'm rarely involved in this OData testing, since we have QAs and things like that. And when you look at what the testing is doing regarding these backend services, most of the time it focuses on CRUD methods, create, read, update, delete, and some function imports. And rarely, they focus on the metadata, for instance. And we've seen in the introduction that the metadata is critical since it contains everything regarding the service description, but also it may contain annotations, right? So this is important for us to validate this metadata. And talking about the tools that are used to validate this, I forgot to start Postman. I knew I forgot something. So it will take some time. I tried myself as a UI developer to use Postman to validate a OData service, just to see how much it was complicated to do so. And oh, not too bad. And I will show you two examples, okay? Sorry, it's a little bit small. Can I zoom? No, sorry for that. The first one will be getting the metadata. So getting the metadata is pretty easy. You just do a GET request, and as a result, you get XML, as I showed you in the browser. But doing just that doesn't make sense, right? What you really want to know is if this metadata contains the right information. So after getting this metadata, the next step is parsing the metadata and extracting information from the metadata. So I diligently tried using Postman, and I built this script. Sorry, it's quite, no, is it okay for everybody? Okay, so this script is using a tool from Postman called XML to JSON that will convert the XML you get into a JSON, well, an object in JavaScript. But to be able to parse this XML, then I had to do a lot of assumptions. Typically, I had to assume that the prefixes that were used in my XML to qualify the nodes that are used in this schema have a known name. So typically, I had to use EDMX, column EDMX to access the root node. And then I had to go through EDMX data services to get the data services node. But as you may know, in XML, namespaces can be prefixed with anything. So if tomorrow, whatever the reason, my XML changes and the prefixes are different, this test is broken, typically. Then, if I want to access a very specific entity from this XML, well, I need to go over all the entities definition to locate the right one, which is not too bad, honestly, but quite cumbersome if you have to write it for the first time. And then to validate the properties of this entity, I have almost to do the same thing to find the right field. And then I have to write these tests to validate, for instance, that my property title is not nullable, that it has a max length, and it has the proper label that is titled here. Okay? I would pretend that it's not too much complicated when you know how to do that, but it takes time, right? And it's fragile because it's extremely dependent on the way the XML is written. Second example I would like to show you is if you want to test batch requests. Batching is a default, a supported feature of the OData model that will encapsulate several requests into one network request that will be a batch request containing several information. Typically, you have to build a body that describes all the requests you would like to submit. So that was not too much complicated, but I was able to do that. But the worst is when you get the answer contains more than one answer. So if you want to analyze every bit of the answers, you need to parse this text result in order to extract the information you're looking for. And to be honest with you guys, I lost here. I just was like, okay, too bad. I don't want to do that, right? Doesn't make sense to me. Stop it. So, coming back to OData testing. Let's step a little bit backward and look at a UI5 application. When we UI developers build UI5 application, we rely on UI5. So typically our job mostly consists in building MVC entities, well, objects, so views, controllers, and models. And when it comes to OData model, actually OData model is provided by SAP UI5, and it's already managing the communication with the backend. And as a result, we get a container that receives all the entities that you read, that you can manipulate, and everything is done almost automatically, right? So if you think about OData testing, this line here shows you what you can test when you do OData testing with tools such as Postman or JMeter or whatever the flavor you prefer. But if you look a little bit up and if you leverage the OData model, actually not only you will have easier tools, I will show you that right after, but on top of that you validate a little bit more since you also validate the OData model. Okay? So what are the benefits of using the OData model? First of all, it validates the metadata. The metadata is required for the OData model to start properly. And once it gets it, it will parse it for you. You have nothing to do. And it will even provide you information about the entities. So it will be very easy for the JavaScript developer that I am to extract information from this metadata. And first, on top of that, it encapsulates all the CRUD operations, which means this OData model will serialize and deserialize the entities for you. You don't have to do any kind of parsing. And batching is like for free. You have nothing to do. Batching works out of the box. So let me show you what it means in terms of coding using Node.UI5. I will try to zoom a little bit. So in this example, I used Mocha. If you don't know Mocha, it's a testing framework which is available with Node.js or browser whatsoever, and that is using BDD, behavior description, right? So the first step would consist in loading Node.UI5, instantiating my OData model, connecting to my server, and waiting for the metadata to be loaded. Once I did that, then I can leverage this OData model to extract information. For instance, if I want to validate that an entity exists with the right fields, the OData model provides this getProperty method with this syntax that allows you to immediately access an entity property with some attributes on it. So if I want to know if my entity's title property is not nullable, I just use this syntax. I don't have to parse the XML, it's done for me. On the same way, I can validate that the max length of this title is 200 and the label is title. Let's go to the batching part. Batching is really easy. If I want to do batching with OData model, I just have to throw SU request, and that's it. And the result, I get it almost immediately, and I don't have to parse it, which means I will get an array of objects which are already deserialized by the OData model. So if I want to validate the content of this object, I just have to use it, typically. Okay, so if I show you this, OData testing, as I mentioned, the project that I showed you contains everything if you want to look at it. And then Mocha produced this result that validates everything. So maybe you might be wondering, okay, that's cool, but what about the effort, right? If you're asking the UI developers to do that, you will do the job of the QA. Well, I guess they will be happy. But, but the point is, when you build an application, one of the good practice of building applications is also to get ready for the testing. And ideally, if you're doing TDD, you even start with the test first. But for UI, it's a little bit more complicated. But at least you make sure that your mock server is ready. And when you build the mock server, you can build it the TDD way, which means you build tests to validate that the mock server will implement some of the features that you require. And to some extent, these tests that you build for your mock server, you can remove the mock server and run them against the real server. Obviously, you will not run all the tests because maybe you are altering data, using critical operations, but I would say you can leverage some of these tests to test the real backend. So let me show you some tests that I built for the workshop, actually, that I will be giving. So these tests are QUnit tests. So if you're familiar with QUnit, This will validate that the mock server exposes some predefined items, that the creation respects some constraints, that you can update the items. And actually, I can run them on top of the mock server. I will get this result. This result is the typical result you would get out of a QUnit test. Okay? The only thing is that here I'm testing the mock server. Now, if I want to reuse exactly the same test and run them against my real OData server, I will use this JavaScript here. Quite small, actually, right? And what I will do, I will use Node.QUnit, which is the QUnit implementation inside Node.js. And I just have one trick, which is I need to boot UI5. But once I did that, the test that I will run is exactly the same test that I'm running against my mock server. And this will be executed against the OData server. So to show you that, this one, QUnit mock server, I need to expand my window because the output is quite big. But here, oh, I got 2 errors actually. I was not expecting that. Okay, I will need to check that. But yeah, typically, it just demonstrated that my OData server has a problem. But the good point is, in terms of effort, it did not require me, I would say, not even 1 hour to run exactly the same test against the OData server. So as a UI developer, I can build my mock server, create my TDD test, and tell my QA, hey, here are some tests you can reuse to validate the behavior of the OData server. And to run them, here is the component, not UI5, that will do it for you. That's it for the chapter. Ultimately, right? Ultimately, we would like to have all the tests that we build for the UI to also use them to validate the backend. So ultimately, I would like to do OPA, since I'm quite good at doing OPA, end-to-end. Okay? There are solutions existing, and I believe today there is a presentation about UI verify, right? However, what I'm showing you is a proof of concept. It's not yet fully ready, but I would like you to, to raise some interest in this solution, just to see that there are some solutions to run OPA test end-to-end with no cost for the UI developer. That's the most important part. So let's talk about OPA and the place of OPA inside the pyramid of test. So this was presented last year. QUnit is basically unit test, right? OPA is more like component testing. You test the UI, but you removed the backend since you're using the mock server, right? If you want to do end-to-end with OPA against a real backend, first of all, you have to remember that OPA is quite interesting because as a developer, I make sure that every time the application is modified, I also modify my OPA objects so that the tests are running. That's a requirement. I cannot deliver my application if my tests are not running. So my tests are always in sync with my application, which is already quite a good thing. If you think about other solutions where you record, for instance, the screen or you record the CSS selectors to access the elements, it's quite fragile. Every time the application is modified, you have to modify the test because, well, the interface changed typically. But as a UI developer investing a lot on OPA, I'm responsible of maintaining this OPA test. So that's a good thing in the end because my tests are always working with the current version of the application. And when running this OPA test, actually I need the OPA code somewhere, and I need the application that I will test to be at the same place. Why? Because we're using the iframe integration for running the OPA test. So typically, I will run my OPA test, the application that I'm running is at the same place, and everything is fine, since I'm using the mock server. But if I want to remove the mock server and use the backend, then the application I'm running should be also at the same place at the backend. Otherwise, you will have the application on server A, the backend on server B, and then you come back to this CORS limitation. You need to validate that this backend allows this UI to talk to it, right? So ideally, what I would do, I will use the UI that is here, so that this CORS limitation disappears. But the OPA are here, and I'm opening an iframe to this server. So obviously I will have a problem then, because the OPA code will try to manipulate the iframe content that is coming from a different server. So then again, it won't work. And since the OPA tests are not delivered with the application, I cannot run the OPA test on my server. It does not exist. So yeah, it's not possible to run OPA test against a distant server. But the good news is that you could use a proxy server. And with this proxy server, which is more like a reverse proxy, what you can do is you can flatten the system landscape so that you from a browser point of view, it believes that the OPA test and the application is running at the same place. And then by doing that, you're cheating a little bit, but you're removing all these limitations, right? And from the OPA point of view, it will be as if the application you're running is on the same place. So it should be working. So I will show you a demo. It's a proof of concept, and there are lots of questions which are not yet answered, such as how do you authenticate? That's a big question, actually, but it's not yet resolved. And the application I'm using to demonstrate that, I forgot to open this, is one sample application from Open UI5, just to show you. Sorry, I have to open that. So what I did, yeah, that one. I created a OPA test for this application here. Maybe I can zoom a little bit. This shopping cart sample. So if I open it, just to show you what application I'm talking about. Yeah. Here we go. So this application, maybe you've seen it already. This is an application where you can order items, open the shopping cart, then proceed with the checkout and things like that. Okay. There is no OData yet. Okay. It's all simulated. But I wanted from a conceptual point of view to validate that I was able to manipulate this application. So if I try to create an OPA test where I start the application from this remote URL and I try to run this OPA test locally, what will happen? Typically, it will fail. Why? Because maybe you can't read it, but it says that I'm trying to access a frame that has a different origin, right? So how to solve that? Since there is a proxy inside this Node UI5, you can do that. You can just simulate a local URL by redirecting all the requests to this remote server. And if I do that, what will happen is that this time, this iframe will open and I will be able to manipulate it. And then I can play with it. I can automate this application, which is remote, but appears as local from my browser. So the next step for me will be to solve the authentication, how the backend may react. Also, there is a, how do you prepare the backend to receive this test? Typically, you may build some data set. So there are lots of questions which remain open. But to me, that was the validation of the first step, being able to use OPA code that is local onto a remote server. And that will be probably my next steps, how to finalize this demo so that I can do really end-to-end with the OPA code that I'm used to do. I'm not using any other tool. To conclude, I hope I'm in time.
Yes, you're sure.
Perfect. Obviously, there is more than UI in UI5, and I couldn't repeat that enough. There is way more than UI in UI5. And the point is, I built this module to allow you to use the other things, such as the OData model. Just a quick message. Typically, something that will happen soon to be ready, it's OData model v4, right? And OData model v4, we will need to use it, right? Well, it's already available, if I'm correct. And from a testing point of view, it can be a completely different padding shift for the testers, right? But for us, as UI developers, we have no choice. We have to use it. So we could help those people to test these servers just because we use it. And we use it with the OData model. So since this OData model v4 can be used inside a command line, it will be easy to automate. So this test can be built almost for free. I said almost because there are some little things to do, but I mean, this is possible, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel again and again. And I'm all for the code recycling, you know? So let's reuse what we have to make it work. And small note about that. Actually, I had a lot of fun doing that. And it's completely a side project. That's nothing related to SAP. I did it on my own, and I learned a lot doing that. And I could not more encourage you to try things. Honestly, when I got this challenge of, oh, could you embed the mock server inside Node.js, I was like, maybe, let's try. And it came out that I reached a point where I was able to do that, but also I built lots of additional tools on top of that. So this brought new ideas, and really, I mean, yeah, I got some clear understanding on all these limitations with cores and things like that, which I didn't have before trying that. So I learned a lot doing that, and I really encourage you to try things, to validate that your ideas are maybe working, and I mean, the failure is a possibility, and that's okay. You always learn something out of it, either because you succeeded, or even if you failed, you learn that, yeah, that was not possible. But I'm pretty sure that you learn something out of it. So that would be the main message here. Try, learn, experiment, that's okay. And that's it.